Good afternoon, and welcome to How We Work Now, Engineering, IT, and Optimizing the IP Transition. Today's webinar will be hosted by contributing editor Glenn Dixon of TV News Check. Glenn, take it away.
Good afternoon. Welcome to How We Work Now. I'm Glenn Dixon. The relationship between broadcast engineering and information technology at TV stations and networks has evolved over the past decade, driven by changes in the core technology used for on-air operations. The gradual shift from dedicated broadcast equipment to common off-the-shelf computer hardware made the IT department an essential partner of broadcast engineering, while at the same time spurring staffers in both departments to learn new skills. The industry's ongoing transition to internet protocol-based networking, as well as recent moves by some broadcasters to run key functions as software applications in the public cloud, has only increased the importance of IT in the broadcast air chain. Today, we've gathered a panel of experts to examine the current state of engineering and IT collaboration and to explore best practices for the future. Joining me today are Joe Adelia, Director of Technology Projects, Hearst Television; Jeff Birch, VP of Engineering, CBS Television Stations; Paul Capizzi, CIO and SVP of Technology, Fox Corp; and Bob Valinsky, Sales Manager, VizRT Americas. For the audience, we'd like to make this experience as interactive as possible, so please use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists, which we'll address towards the end of the session. I'd like to start with Jeff. How are your engineering and IT departments arranged today at both the station and corporate level, and how has that changed in the past 5 years?
Well, today we still have more of the traditional model where IT is its own group and the broadcast engineers are their own group. But as every day goes by, that merging continues to happen, and eventually that line of demarcation will go away. The stations are a little more homogeneous in that while the IT group is still called the IT group, they're part of the engineering group at the station. Because we've had this merging of what used to be traditionally the television broadcast domain and what used to be the desktop IT guys. But really, any TV station today, that's all one and the same. More video is flowing as data now than as discrete audio and video. So the two groups have to work together as one unit.
Okay, thanks. Paul, what's the relationship like in the arrangement at Fox?
Sure. Thanks, Glenn. Similar to Jeff, we have two separate organizations. We have the engineering organization and we have the tech organization. Although there are two separate organizations, they work very closely together, right? There's a strong partnership between the two. There's been an evolution around the traditional tech at the stations have evolved their skills, right, and helped in engineering areas where traditionally they were more desktop support, help desk people, have evolved with increased their skill levels, or the IT manager has changed the skill sets and job descriptions. However, the roles are completely separate. We don't, it's more of a partnership. There's no reporting structure lines. I think the local stations work very closely. IT work closely with engineering, but the organization is very much separate, run by two separate leads. But I think to Jeff's point, the technology is driving us to continue to work together and look for more modern ways to deploy and secure our systems. So, but that's really where we stand today. Still, there is no talk to combine them. They're still two separate orgs.
And just a follow-up in terms of relative size in headcount, how do they compare between engineering and IT?
It's heavy on the engineering side. So each station has a few, 2 to 3 individuals in tech, and then the majority of the station engineers, will be on the broadcast side of the house.
Okay, thanks. Joe, what's the arrangement at Hearst, and and has that changed at all? And can you speak to the headcount comparison as well?
So I think Jeff and Paul made the right point, is that with the technology changing and shifting over past several years, even greater than that, it's really necessitated the blending, if you will, of IT and engineering. And that's really our current state, is that it's one department, reports up to the director of engineering. Everyone in the department does, and it's managed as one technology department, and that's kind of the way we view it. Now, I will say that, there are, of course, specialists within the department. Sure, there's an IT, manager or administrator who will oversee, certain IT, technologies and given tasks. But they're, at the same time, it's really no different than you have, somebody, managing your RF or your transmission or your studio systems. These are just leads, in our view. And also, I think it's undeniable that, the crossover between what we had once called just pure IT is now, you could call it broadcast IT, but generally speaking, it's just technology. And there isn't a piece of gear that comes into a facility today that doesn't attach to the LAN. So, the most important piece going forward is just making sure that it's installed and managed properly from a security point of view, and also corporate governance point of view, et cetera. But we're a very standardized organization, so we can do that, from our corporate team can kind of provide the right guidance for the stations to kind of install gear in the right place, and then it falls underneath the appropriate category, where again it's we manage our technology sectors by standardization, I think is the best way to put it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we're gonna dive in a little more to that security issue a little later. Bob, broadcasters here have been talking about how the relationship between engineering and IT has been changing. How has that changed the sales process for a vendor like VizRT?
Well, since VizRT is primarily a software company, we really see the IT department getting involved in every sale, especially if it's the software is going to be on a VM or in the cloud. They need to do security risk assessments in some cases. And what I'm running into is the traditional broadcast engineers aren't thinking IT yet, so they don't bring in the IT department initially. And then we get caught just as the project is about to launch, where a security assessment needs to be done. So from a vendor side, we need to ask up front now with the broadcast engineer, does IT need to do a security assessment? How long is that going to take? Because sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks for them to do an assessment on the software, which can delay the project if we don't plan ahead for that.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, as you've invested in more IT technology to run your broadcast functions, has your relationship with key vendors changed, particularly in the area of support and service contracts?
We've become a lot more reliant on the vendors. Gone are the days when you bought a 300 switcher and you got the manual, it was 3 inches thick. You gave a guy a scope in a couple of days to go learn it, but you were very self-sufficient. You could keep that thing going for 30, 40 years. That's not the case now. I mean, with the density that the way things are packed, you can't troubleshoot locally. And a lot of it's living, breathing data. So we're reliant on the vendor to be able to dial in, if you will, and help us troubleshoot where the issue is. And a lot of times it's not the equipment per se, it's the networking that we did to connect that device to another device. And that's where the logjam is. So yes, we've become very dependent on the vendors, more so than we'd like to be quite honest. And those bills are getting rather steep as well. The support costs are equal to, if not more sometimes, than the price of the device over its lifetime. Yeah.
Paul, I'd like you to weigh in on this, because one of the things that has been represented to me is, with traditional broadcast vendors, the service component was sort of inherent, but that IT guys look at it a little differently and expect to be able to do some maintenance themselves in terms of software development. But what do you see from Fox's point of view?
I think both Bob and Jeff make valid points. I think when it comes to broadcast vendors, I think we have a very strong partnership with our engineering community at stations where we do bring the vendors in and IT in and have a solid team conversation. Does it require an InfoSec review? As Bob mentioned, is there a tech component to the implementation? Do we know all this up front before we go ahead and acquire whatever technologies we're looking to deploy? And I think that has really helped get in front of some of the complexities. I also think we do, the broadcast historically the engineers have relied on their vendors, right? I think that's consistent across all organizations. And I think where tech has leaned in is starting to help with that infrastructure as we look to put everything on a network, everything virtualize it, less physical components in it within the stations, and virtualize those platforms and look for maybe cloud alternative backup solutions and such. That's where tech, I think, overlaps there and partners with the engineering community, ensure that we're taking a little bit more of that ownership around helping the engineering community as opposed to relying on the vendors so much. Where the engineers would still do their function, that wouldn't change. But I think, engineering and IT from that perspective and how we lean in there and maybe pull more of that, less of that responsibility on our vendors going forward is going to be key for our success, and start bringing that skill internally. Let the engineering community do more of what they relied on vendors for in the past.
Okay. I think from our perspective, Glenn, I think there's one key point that we like to make is that we don't really call them vendors. It's partners, right? And we create a strong partnership with the technology provider, and that's where we start. And then through the partnership, we bring our necessary team members to the table, and we develop what we call our in-house standard. And typically, regardless of market size, we deploy the same technology at each station, so we can work together upstream first before the product is deployed, or the application or whatever it is makes it to the field, and we can have that standard in place. And that standard includes all of the above, including networking, security, and even operating procedures. And I think that's key. And I think it comes out of that strong partnership with the technology provider, because we get in deep. We know a lot of the key players in each organization, and we stay close. And I think we do well because of it.
And has the is IT sitting down across from that vendor a lot earlier in the process, or from day one compared to where you were? Maybe?
So again, we don't really have that dividing line in certain technologies. It's inherent, right? It's there, yes, but in general thought or concept or project planning or whatnot, we don't have that, right? It's that we sit down as a technology team, and whether that's locally or as a corporate project. And yeah, there's people who are strong in each discipline. There's somebody who's strong in IT, somebody strong in engineering, facilities, whatever the need is. They're all at the table at the same time early on for day one, in the technology selection process. And that makes it easier as we go forward. And again, we have the ability, and we practiced this for a long time, is to have a true standardization across our footprint. And that allows us to do it because we have, we don't have to worry about, how will this particular technology snap in that station? We don't have to worry about that. We know that all the stations are the same, so we can provide the proper guidance up front and make the right decisions early on in the process.
Right, and make them once, basically. I mean, that's kind of the benefit of virtualization and COTS, is that you can standardize across a large group.
That's the game.
Bob, Jeff spoke about some of the maintenance challenges from the broadcaster's perspective, with some of the IP-based system, networking being a complex issue. From the vendor side, how has the move to IP-based systems changed the scope of technology that BizRT needs to support?
Okay, at first I have to say Jeff's comment brought up a memory about buying a Wheatstone board years ago and it came with the cross-reference chart where you could pick up an IC at Radio Shack if you needed to stay on the air. Those days are gone.
Long gone.
Yeah,
So is Radio Shack.
yeah, yeah. But no, everything's become more complex now. We're not supporting individual products, we're supporting systems at this point, and we need to know how to integrate it into the customer's IT system. So, it's changing the way our support structure is. Instead of just having a call desk with a product specialist, now we have to have technical account managers assigned to big accounts with systems so that, we keep documentation, the whole system diagram, the software versions of every piece so that, when they call in for support, we're not having to recreate everything up front. We've got the documentation there, so it makes it easier to log into the system. But it means we do a lot of documentation on the install, and that technical account manager keeps it updated, so it makes it faster to support.
And do you find that you have to work with other vendors as well more to troubleshoot problems because there's so many interconnected systems? And we talked about partnerships between stations and vendors, but how about between, vendor to vendor?
Oh, absolutely. It's not like the old days where we would go put in a graphic system, hook up a monitor to the BNC cable and say there's an output. In a 2110 system, the switcher at the Sony switcher could be pushing the button saying, I'm not getting the key signal. But it might just be the tables are wrong in the 2110 router. And it's not our problem, but we need to work with 2 or 3 vendors to solve a simple issue like that.
Yeah, okay, thanks. We talked about the lines blurring between engineering and IT to the extent where, Joe says at Hearst, it's one department. There isn't a distinct setup like you have at CBS and Fox. But, what major cultural differences still exist between the two groups? And, and when it comes to the service component of it in-house, how do other staffers such as newsroom personnel, producers, editors, view the two departments when they have a technical issue? Jeff, maybe you take that one first. And then...
It's a culture issue. The traditional broadcast engineer has been in TV. He's been in show business all his life. He understands the immediacy and what a second and a half of black on the air means. The folks that have come up through the IT ranks are extremely smart in their own way, but they haven't been exposed to the show business side as much. Probably our greatest success is at a couple of stations, we took the lead IT people and they became the assistant chiefs, or in some cases, they became the chiefs at the station because over time they learned the culture and then they were able to merge both worlds. Having had that tremendous intimacy with the IT side, they learned the TV side, they learned what a remote was, what meaning going on the air at 5 o'clock really means. And so they were able to pull it all together. So for us, the biggest piece is just the two different cultures and bringing them together so that the IT world understands the immediacy of TV. At 5 to 5, don't tell me put in a ticket when something doesn't work. I want a phone number and I want a human being I could get to help us figure it out and get on the air at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. That's actually, it's something I've heard from broadcasters who are implementing, cloud systems for some key applications. They still want a phone number of somebody they can talk to run their problem by at the end of the day, even if it's something that's running as an application on, a server in a data center 1,000 miles away.
The big question I ask everybody now is, because I understand the move to the cloud and I understand all the benefits and all the advances, but when it breaks, who do I call?
Right. Paul, how about from your perspective, from the IT side, how do you see, what cultural differences do you see still existing, and how, what's the sort of service path when there's a problem with a piece of equipment in the station that, merges both worlds, broadcast and IT?
At the station level, VPs of engineering, call the shots, right? It's, like as Jeff mentioned, that they, historically always owned the operations, and they will continue. And I think that, from a cultural standpoint, I think, it is known that we're a 24/7 operations, right? And, I don't think there's any issues culturally. I think that they work well together. Everybody understands that we're a 24/7 shop, and that, there's sometimes I think we run into some similar challenges where there's a little bit of maybe a miscommunication as to understanding as to, okay, we're making an IT change. How does that impact, downstream? Could it impact something on the engineering side? And every once in a while, we find opportunities for improvements there in our change management process and our communication process. And I think that's a little bit of a growing pain for us, because as the technology becomes more dependent on internet connectivity or the network switching or patch management or InfoSec tools, right? We need to be really mindful of those impacts. And, even if we're 99% sure that there's no impact downstream to any of the broadcast platforms, we need to be sure that everybody's aware. So, and I think we do a pretty good job from a cultural standpoint as to that communication, the partnership at the station level. And, again, nothing happens at a station without the VP of engineering sign off on it. So whether it's an InfoSec change or push, or an enterprise technology update or change, we make sure that the VP of engineering is okay with it and approves that maintenance window.
Okay, thanks. I guess I'll take a moment just to address our audience. I see some comments coming in through chat, which is great. But if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, just because it will help me find it towards the end of the session, and I'm not flipping back and forth. Joe, can you talk about the service aspect of dealing with issues from both the engineering side and the IT side, and maybe give a little color on what the folks in the newsroom expect when they have a problem?
Well, yeah, it's pretty obvious that news must go on, right? So it's a sense of immediacy that we have in live broadcasting that does not go away, and that's one of the key reasons why we do have a blended department is that everyone in the department attends to what is going on with the television station at that given moment, and on air always takes priority, and that's just the way we build that presence of each department. But I think speaking to that presence and how do we get there is probably the larger question, right? Is that we all know that we have to attend to the immediate needs, but how do we do it? We do it through education programs inside the group with our internal processes. So, Hearst is a wonderful company, and they support we on the technical side, and really all verticals inside our organization with training support and funding. So we started a program, boy, it's over 10 years ago now, that we called IT for the Broadcast Engineer. And that was number one, where we had to make sure the broadcast engineer understood how to deal with day-to-day IT issues, because of a lot of times when that engineer would be called to the newsroom, it very well could be a IT issue, and it needs to be dealt with immediately. And because because in most cases, and if not all, we are blended, where the IT the broadcast engineer can take care of that issue, then he's has the tools to be able to do that. And now, just recently, we've actually looked at it in a totally different light, where given the amount that the skill set of new hires, people who are coming to us, are more IT centric than they are broadcast centric, which is just a fact of life, right? It's just IT is everywhere, so it's very common to have good qualified people on the IT side, but they really don't know anything about television broadcasting. So we're starting a program
that we hope to get kicked off later this year that will be broadcast engineering for the IT specialist, right? So it's kind of the inverse of what we started 10 years ago. And by no means are we going to abandon the first program, but the second one will be a complementary one for the new hires to help them, understand how TV really operates and understand some of these more underlying things to I think to Jeff's point is that, you've got to attend to it. You've got to keep it running. And we completely agree with that notion. And we're backing that up with again, these in-house training programs, and our partners are coming in to support us where we need support. And it's turning, the first go around was a tremendous success, and we expect the second one to turn into the same, just because of the amount of support that we have for it.
Thanks. Joe's talked about some of the training they do at Hearst. Jeff, when it comes to things like IP routing and public cloud, have you been able to retrain existing staff to work with some of these new technologies that you're moving key functions to, or do you have to hire new people?
We've been pretty successful of late because I've had a new crop of engineering folks over the last 5 or 6 years who are already IT savvy to some degree. So giving them the additional training and the experience and the exposure, we've been relatively successful in that. Where we've run into the issues is not at the local station, but in that network cloud. When it leaves the station and goes into the corporate infrastructure, they don't have a lot of visibility or experience with a lot of that really intense routing. And so that's where we've had to go out and look for people that have that as a specific discipline, because that's not something we're going to be able to teach them. They're going to learn that elsewhere and bring that in with them. And then hopefully they'll disseminate that to everybody else. But the routing infrastructure has probably been the most difficult to teach and expose people to.
Okay, thanks. Paul, what's your experience been with training and maybe finding new talent at Fox to deal with things like IP routing?
I think it's a consistent challenge, right, in tech or engineering in general, right, and especially these days. But I think training on both sides of the house is key, right? So as we look to new platforms like virtualization or IP routing, we need to ensure that both the tech and the engineering team, wherever those responsibilities will lie, have that skill to maintain it. Just speaking about the recent efforts around virtualization and some of those efforts, we've had training sessions both on the tech and the engineering side. And I think it's a learning curve for both teams. I mean, I think we're on the IT side constantly learning more about the broadcast requirements and needs, and the engineering side learning more about where the technology is going and more of what traditionally might have been technologists and on the enterprise side. So we're constantly offering training for our team members to ensure that both organizations are coming up to speed as the technologies evolve. So. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the partnerships with our vendors are strong, and I believe that we want to bring more of that skill in house. So that's where I think is going to be an uptick in how do we develop those skills in house to react and respond quickly to some of our challenges. I mean, I think as traditionally on the IT side of the house, we've relied more on internal talent to support those systems. And I'd like to see, where our head of our engineering at FTS would also like to develop his team to have that same type of mentality where they can support, their platforms as a first line of defense, right? And still partner with the vendors as a second line or maintenance and such. But I think it's it's a constant battle where we have to continue to challenge ourselves and train our staff and ensure that we're getting that interest, and we're trying to keep that consistency across all of the stations. So it's an exciting time, I think, both on the engineering side and the IT side.
I think there's one other important point there too, Paul, is that as more systems are moving more toward pure IT, that training becomes more readily available. You know, for example, in a specific case in our operations, we went virtual many years ago and we added VMware. Well, to get VMware certification is something that you can get from several different training resources, and you know, we're upwards of 40 people on staff who are VMware certified, you know, and that's really great. And you know, our company put the resources behind that to get that done, which only makes us a stronger enterprise, a stronger operating body to have that in-house training. But we got to it very easily because it's a common tech, you know, and we were able to go out and get training on it. And same for CCNA and other type of technology that's becoming very prevalent and everyone needs to know something about. So, I mean, that's really a great opportunity for anyone to jump into, but we've done it as a group.
Okay, thanks. You know, Bob, from a vendor perspective, has the training you offer customers for your products, has that changed? And are there any special cases, you know, within a station that require extra work?
The training we're offering customers really hasn't changed. It's still the operational and design training. But our professional services team who goes out in the field, they needed the extra training. You know, now we have people that need to be AWS certified, you know, get the Microsoft certification. Just about everyone's had to take the SEMPTE 2110 course. So it was more training for our guys. But most of the facilities we're going to has somebody who's got AWS experience. And hopefully, and most of the 2110 facilities we're going to have a systems integrator who's skilled in it. But yeah, from our perspective, we're expecting the customers to come up to speed on the background technology.
Okay, thanks. You know, one of the things we touched on a little bit, but you know, as more broadcast systems become IP based, security is obviously a concern. You know, on its earnings call yesterday, you know, Sinclair talked about the effect of the cyber attack it suffered last fall, that cost it, you know, 63 million in advertising revenues, and even if after insurance pays out, that they said there's still 24 million in costs that are not going to be able to recover. Paul, you know, when you look across the Fox stations, how are engineering and IT working to secure the broadcast systems you have in place?
So, you know, we do have an organization, you know, within within Fox that runs InfoSec, and similar to the enterprise and the broadcast pillars as we talked about, InfoSec is a strong partner in our day-to-day. You know, I think we've done a really good job at partnering with them as we evaluate new technologies. You know, work closely with our vendors to ensure that, you know, they can run endpoint protection. They could be patched as Microsoft or other vendors release patches. I believe that our InfoSec team is constantly looking for, you know, better ways to get our arms around and understand the broadcast environments as well too. Just like enterprise tech, I believe that it's a new landscape and they need to understand all the moving parts. There's no silver bullet. I think that, you know, as we look to leverage virtualizations and opportunities to back up, you know, our environments and our content, you know, will strengthen our ability to recover in the event we have challenges. But I think the partnership is relatively strong. I think that, you know, it really comes down to our partnerships with the vendors and ensure that, you know, as we set our standards and guidelines for Fox, that they're in line with them too, and that we work together to ensure that we can get where we need to be as soon as possible. So I think ultimately, you know, it's going to be an ongoing battle forever, right? We're always going to look for ways to improve and strengthen us. There's no easy way to do it, but I think our partnership with the vendors are strong, and then we'll continue to partner with InfoSec to look for opportunities to strengthen our environment.
Okay. And you know, just to follow up on that, have you seen a change in mindset about what kind of security the broadcast manufacturers need to provide over the last couple of years, you know,
Yeah,
compared to.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think we talked about this on a panel, a few months back.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the broadcast vendors and manufacturers that have really leaned in, and brought in their own CISOs, their own, CIOs or CTOs or whatever titles may be, to just help and strengthen their process involvement and really just being sure that they're hardening their systems as best they could, and offering redundancy. And so a lot of our vendors have come back to us with solutions that will, allow better resiliency or better redundancy or better security. So I think there's a big change in mindset. And I also think, to give kudos to the engineering community at FTS, I think that they've also changed their mindset, not in a way that, this is more of just a learning curve, right? It's like we have to think about these things now, and they do a great job at ensuring that, we partner with InfoSec, and we as Bob mentioned earlier, InfoSec has a seat at the table with engineering when it comes to assessing technologies, making sure that, we check all the boxes before we, move down to acquiring that tech. So I think it's a cultural shift for everybody, but I think we're already ahead of that, and we're doing the best we can.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, at CBS, how are engineering and IT working together to tackle the security issue?
There was a time when the broadcast gang and the InfoSec gang were at each other's throats, and we understand their mandate, and we totally get it, that you've got to keep the barn locked down, because once the bad people are inside, it's a really difficult task to get them out. But as time has gone on, they've actually become a really good partner with us. They understand what we need to get done, and we understand what they need to prevent. And so now we bring them in right at the forefront. Any new projects, any initiatives, we get their advice going in. And to your question about the manufacturers, if you go back maybe even 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of the vendors were telling us, oh, you can't run antivirus on our machines. It'll corrupt the system, or it'll slow it down. They've all gotten religion, and I don't think there's a vendor out there now that doesn't work with you to run some kind of preventative software on their machines so that they're not the root cause of your system going down. And yes, we're trying to build that moat around all of CBS. And of course, now with the merger, we're a monolithic monster with all kinds of places for people to try to access us and get into our system. So we've got to be extremely careful with what we build, how we build it, and who we build it with.
Yeah, I heard monolithic monster was bounced around as a name, but Paramount sounded better. Follow up on that. Did various panels talking about stations tackling news production through COVID, and one of several guys said to me, we basically asked people to turn off firewalls or basically relax a lot of policies during that time, just to let people stay on air and produce news. In some ways, did that tighten that experience of working together to manage remote work and remote access for so many folks? Did that strengthen the working relationship between InfoSec and engineering at your stations?
In the beginning, it strained it severely, because we wanted to open everything and allow everybody to do what they needed to do. But as time went on and we learned their priorities and they learned ours, it did strengthen it, and we're much better off as a result of it now.
Okay.
I think we approach everything as security is top of mind, even to every user, where every year we have a security awareness, let's call it a test, but a program that each employee has to walk through. So we start at the user level and work our way up, so it's top of mind everywhere. And when we went through the work from home or remote from home scenarios, that was the number one item, was what can we do inside of our security covenants to bring this signal back home, or to connect this person properly. And we work all of our solutions with that in mind, and very successful ones, and some that are still in play and will be in play going forward because they've worked out well. And because we did them properly, it's great homework that we can keep for forever, you know.
Bob, anything from your point of view on a security question that's, you know, changed? I know you guys are a software-based company, but has how you approach security changed from the vendor perspective in the last couple of years?
Oh, it absolutely has, because in you know, certainly not too many years ago, the whole broadcast department would be on a separate IT network because it didn't need access to the outside world. So you could isolate yourself, you know, your newsroom computer system and your graphics were its own network. Not anymore. Everything's connected to the internet. So we need to, you know, our engineering team is constantly watching the Microsoft updates for the vulnerabilities and making sure, you know, we keep people on the right Windows versions. Make sure that, you know, you can't let people get behind in the vulnerabilities. So we're constantly watching that.
Thanks. I write about a lot about new facility builds and refreshes, and you know, one of the things that was brought up to me, you know, traditional broadcast centers a couple decades ago maybe had dedicated jobs like videotape operator. You know, new IP-based facilities are looking for personnel to perform multiple functions each day. As IT departments take on more flexibility, more responsibility, for broadcast operations, does that give you more flexibility in job roles at your stations? You know, Paul or Jeff, you want to tackle that first?
For us, it's been a two-edged sword. Yes, it does give us more flexibility, but at the same time, it has challenged some of the more traditional roles. And people look at it and say, you know, I used to do X, Y, and Z, and now you want me to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And can I handle all that in the same day? And do I have training for it? You know, technology is going to march on, and it's going to forever change this industry every day. And we all went from tubes to transistors to ICs. We all went from analog to digital. It's going to continue evolving like that. And all the roles are going to change over time, just like they have in the past. So this is just another chapter in that.
Okay.
I agree. I think, you know, it's opportunity, right? I mean, you know, we all want to grow in our roles and our skills. And I think, you know, that challenge is there and it's there to stay. I think it's an opportunity for you know, individuals to gain new skill and grow and take on new responsibilities or even make moves. I mean, I think we've talked about people moving from engineering to IT or IT to engineering. I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, as Joe talks about it, it's really just one team, right? We work together regardless who they all report to. But I think it's an opportunity for anybody who is open to, you know, learning something new and you know, potentially having maybe a new job or new job description down the road.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and Joe, I know you mentioned that you've had a couple people move from the IT side to lead engineering from some stations. Jeff, you've had that experience as well, right? At CBS,
And very successfully, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have former IT managers who are now directors of engineering, you know, and we're very proud of them.
Right. And probably more, given what everyone's been talking about, the talent pool of who you're bringing in, who you're hiring these days, focus more of that in the future, I would imagine. You know, that leads me to, you know, the flip side of that. You know, we did mention RF at one point. I heard at least once. We talked about, I heard 2110 like 7 times already, and you know, but you know, we talk about all these new technology stations are buying and how to require software skills over traditional broadcast engineering experience. But at the same time, you know, broadcasters like Hearst, like Fox, you're rolling out a whole new transmission system in ATSC 3.0 that still requires RF expertise. And, you know, going forward, how important do you see that RF engineering know-how continuing to be for your business? And where do you find those future RF engineers? You know, the thing I hear consistently from folks is that the current base of RF engineers is aging across the industry, and that there aren't any young people today who are learning RF to replace them.
Right. Well, just in like everything, when you look inside just the RF section, or, you know, transmission, as we've always called it, that's even evolved quite a bit. You know, we went from you know, tubes to now solid state. And in doing so, things have gotten a bit easier, might I say, because it's more of a replacement of a module as opposed to component level or tuning a tube, you know, that kind of thing. So that in one way, you know, the evolution has helped, but the basics of RF are still there. It's still the same. And I think going forward, as we evolve through ATSC 3.0 and as single frequency networks start to happen and become more prevalent, yeah, this is a serious part of our business, and it's what we do. We're over the air broadcasters, and, you know, to maintain that signal is job one, as we say. You know, our rule number one is stay on the air, right? That's what we say internally, and I think, you know, the RF part of that is key. So there's no doubt. But I think, you know, just to make another comment about that, and as things are evolving, is that, you know, the whole front end of ATSC 3.0 is all essentially an IT stack, right? So here I'm, you know, I'm almost contradicting myself, right? As I'm saying that yes, you need to understand, and we need RF specialists to maintain that over-the-air signal and the antennas, transmission line, etc. But the front end of the transmission chain now is, you know, they're all virtual machines. It's all IP, it's dash, you know. So, you know, there's a definite mix there in capabilities, and I look forward to seeing, you know, what our engineers really want to take on. You know, I think Paul made the good point. It opens up opportunity, and, you know, are we going to see, you know, engineers who are strong on the IT side and say the front end part of an IT, ATSC 3 transmission, want to take on more of the RF because they want to do end to end, or converse? Is there some, you know, an RF engineer who says, yeah, I want to know really how to make the signal and the IT part of this? So I think it's going to be an interesting way forward as things evolve. And you know, from a group that's put on 3 lighthouses in top 20 markets already, we could tell you it's a very challenging feat to pull off, and it requires all hands on deck. And you know, it's going to be very interesting to see what we learn here, even going down the road.
Thanks, Jeff. You know, where do you think you find your RF engineers of tomorrow?
It's a really, really good question, and I don't have a really good answer for that. We tend to raid from each other right now, and fortunately, there's still a bunch of folks that have recently retired that still want to keep their hands in the business, so you can convince them to come out on a contract basis to help, but they're not coming out of the service really much anymore. And just for giggles, I looked up how many licensed ham operators there are in the States. It's less than 1 million. And I would bet you the vast majority of them are older than me. So they're not really going out and working 7 days a week anymore. We're trying to cultivate from within and entice some of the people at the stations to get more involved with RF. I mean, you know, that the transmitter guy was always that mythical person. You never saw them, and they did all this magic, and you never really saw anything happen at the transmitter site. You just heard a lot of noise, and it just worked. So we're trying to teach them some of the black art that went into making that all happen and get them interested. And we're trying to grow from within, but I don't know how successful that's going to be. So going forward, I don't know where the transmitter people are going to come from. And it's more than just our transmitters. I still got to deal with RF mics. I still have microwave I have to deal with. I still have STL links. There's a whole world of RF that's still out there that still needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, it's true. It's something we spend so much time talking about, new technologies, that sometimes all of us are guilty of not acknowledging how many legacy technologies are still driving a lot of operations. Paul, how do you look at this question of where you find that RF engineering talent, and is there anything that can be done from Fox's end to fill that pipe?
You know what, I mean, I don't ultimately manage that group, right? That falls under the engineering and our head of engineering at FTS. But I think it's a growing challenge, as Jeff and Joe have mentioned, and I think that our engineering community shares the same concerns. I think there's been talk about maybe looking at bringing in some new talent and training them, for some people who are not from this industry, and start planting those seeds over the years and watch them grow. I think there's a lot of engineering responsibilities that we need to do that, not just in the RF space. So I think there's definitely opportunity there. I just think how do we take that next step forward, and make an investment and maybe potentially bring in some talent. I know that in other areas of our business, we've done similar type scenarios where we brought in some people out of college and trained them. So I think there's an opportunity there, again, going back to that, opportunity and start training people for learning the business and also some of this technology. And then eventually down the road, wherever that technology leads, I'm sure there'll be a path for opportunity to grow into the larger technology requirements within the business.
Okay, thanks. We have 10 minutes left. I have some more of my own questions for you gentlemen, but I did promise to take some from the audience, and we have a fair number of questions. Some of you guys were naughty and you put them in chat, but I'll try to find them. But as a first question, this is a simple one from William Hayes for Paul. At stations, are operators considered part of the engineering count?
Yes, they are. They're part of the engineering team.
Okay. And here's a question from JP Hayde. In these days with wide area networks throughout the corporation, how are you addressing corporate data and program streams? All on one, or do PGM streams, program streams, and control, are they separated? And I wasn't sure anyone want to tackle that.
Well, we made the mistake early on of commingling all of that, and we're now trying to actually separate it, the broadcast land versus the business land, and we'll keep the media and the program streams segregated to the extent we can, and then the business land and any non-going to air stream is separated out. It's an uphill battle because we did commingle so much of it so early on, but the goal is to try to keep anything that goes to air in its own little world to the best we can.
Okay.
So we don't run two separate networks, right? We have a segmented network, segmented virtually by firewall, and this is a program that we've been even pushing further even these days, is how granular can we segment our network, our LAN, and WAN for that matter. And I think that's the key, is that if the traffic needs to go from A to B, then you should manage it and make sure it gets there. But if it doesn't need to go to B, then you shouldn't have it visible to B, right? And that's part of segmentation and the proper rules that you would put in place on the network. And that's the way we practice it. We also tend to use some proprietary technology for video transport, like TVU Grid, for example, or LTN, which in a way kind of segments that traffic off very separately. And it's kind of a deliberate effort, so we're not managing real-time flows across a WAN, although we can, and we do in some cases, but the main traffic, if we just move it over LTN, which is over the public internet, but it's on their managed network. So we kind of separate it off by using a best in breed type of service like that. And for news OU, it's very easy to move site to site on a TVU Grid or something like that. So
okay, Paul, how do you approach that question at Fox?
Similar to Joe's answer, we segment the network, which we're getting away from the traditional network infrastructure being completely isolated to broadcast and enterprise, but we are segmenting off that traffic. Like Joe mentioned, if A doesn't need to go to B, they can't route that direction. So trying to keep it as simple but as secure as possible, without spending unnecessary money. So I think there's just definitely a transition happening there. I mean, years ago there was less demand on internet, right? Today there's a huge demand on internet, right? So the days of requiring MPLS circuits internally are kind of fading away. Products like SD-WAN and multiple internet connectivity and cloud platforms are starting to grow. So it's definitely it's definitely a moving target, but we're definitely heading that same direction as Joe mentioned.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question from Steve Fahey. How do you deal, and we've touched on a little bit of this already, but how do you deal with help desk requests, either getting immediate help or getting routed to the correct group, IT versus an engineer? What's been a successful help desk setup for this? I know, Paul, you've done some different things at the help desk at Fox recently. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that effort.
Yeah, so I think, as we mentioned earlier, traditionally the tech people that were brought into stations were, quote unquote, the help desk, the desktop support people, and then over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years, they wear many hats, right? They've grown to do a lot of different things. So in order to continue, that effort in allowing that opportunity to grow and these IT staff to take on, new skill and training and do, more challenging things, we're looking to centralize our help desk, right? So and leverage a centralized platform, 24/7 that we can route all of our tickets through, and part of that, platform and orchestration system that will tie into our change management and our ticketing. So this way, as a ticket comes in, if there's an immediate need, is an escalation process to the appropriate people or station or engineering or IT. And then there's a way to track that across the stations and see where there's consistent challenges and look for opportunities to improve them. So we're trying to look at it more holistically, and instead of having each individual station handle those those one-off needs and challenges, try to find a consistent, more challenging way, a consistent, more modern approach to support the stations.
Okay, thanks. Another question from Chuck Primrose. With the change to IP routing systems, does the panel see a faster equipment replacement cycle? I'll run that by Jeff first.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be keeping your core plant routed for 20 years anymore. Yes, it's almost to the point where it's following the replacement cycle of, desktop equipment. You're on a 3 to 5 year cycle, basically, because you're not buying a dedicated piece of hardware anymore. You're buying a data switch. So yes, the short answer is it's going to increase the cycle, or shorten the cycle, I should say.
Okay.
Well, I think that also you can take advantage of some traditional networking topologies like spine leaf, and you can actually scale your network, your routed infrastructure very differently than we have with a monolithic, regular SDI router. So you can today put in, a spine of, say today you put in 400 gigabit spine and you hang a few leaf switches off of that. Well, tomorrow you might find that you need more than 400 gigabit, and you can layer on top of that, whatever it is, terabit, whatever the next is, right? You can layer on top of that. So it does bring some additional life to, the old, they call it the older switches, or the original infrastructure you would put in. So I think the way you have to look at the future for IP routing is just that, is that's a scalable type of approach, as opposed to the traditional monolithic approach that we've always kind of subscribed to, install the big box and then swap it out later. In this case, you could very well scale it and replace components or add components.
Okay, thanks. And One last question from the audience. We'll run by everybody quickly. We only have a minute or two. It's from Steve Powers to everyone. What percentage of your infrastructure today is on-prem versus cloud, and where do you see it moving to in the next 1 to 2 years? Just quickly off the top of your head, if you had to give a rough percentage. I'll start with Jeff.
I'd say today, probably 80% of the stations are still on-prem, and maybe 20% of our facilities are up in the cloud. And over the next 5 years, I think we'll reverse that. The vast majority will be up in the cloud in some fashion, and I'm a subscriber to the hybrid model, where I still want some things on the ground so I can get at them in the event of the ultimate failure, but that's going to be a much smaller footprint than we have today.
Okay. Bob, what do you see amongst your customers? If you had to, where do you think they're at today, and where do you think they are in 2 years in terms of on-prem versus cloud?
For the customers I deal with personally, which are a lot of new customers, most of my new installs are going in the cloud. Customers are saying they don't want to be throwing away boxes with BNC connectors every 5 years like they had in the past. They say you go to the cloud and you upgrade software. They're not dealing with hardware issues in the future.
Okay. Paul, I know Fox overall as a company is moving pretty aggressively on the cloud. At the stations, what's the mix of on-prem versus cloud today?
When you talk to collaboration tools or remote tools, we are significantly in the cloud, right? And I think we're leaning on the broadcast side for cloud as more of that resiliency, DR, and backup strategies, right, for recovery purposes. But we're still very much on-prem. And I think, as Jeff mentioned, I don't really know a percentage off the top of my head, but, we're significantly on-prem. But I would say that, over the next, few years, we're going to probably lean to explore opportunities in the cloud, whether it's a private cloud in one of our facilities, and still have some type of recoverable tech on-prem, right? Because there's only so much you could put into the cloud from an engineering broadcast playout perspective, without taking so much risk. But I think there's plenty of opportunities to leverage the cloud, Glenn. I think that's the direction that we're all going.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Joe, final word from you.
So on the cloud, yes, I agree. We will see an inversion here in the next, say, 5 to 6 years. But something that's really worked great for us is media storage and archive, of media files. That has worked tremendously well for the cloud, and in many cases has been transparent, and has been a good starting place for us because it's allowed us to measure the load on our connectivity, our direct connects or whatnot in and out of the cloud. And also if we go to cold storage, what's the restoration time and those SLAs. So this has been a good way for us to kind of dabble in it with media workflows. Totally agree on the pure play collaboration and traditional user IT type tools. That's all moved out already, right? This is purely just the broadcast TV station part that's still 80% or greater on-prem. But again, we've already explored it, and there is an inversion that's going to happen, and I think we're prepared for it. And now it's as we said, the struggle here is going to make sure that we have the right talent in place to support these systems as we march down the road.
Okay. Well, hey, well said. And I'd like to thank all my panelists for, I think it's been a very informative discussion, and thank the audience for all their questions. A lot of insight there as well. So much appreciated, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.